Hey, it's Min Canada here. You are listening to the Trips and Global on Wheels podcast hour, the place to be to learn about the latest and greatest life stories from people who are doing incredible disability advocacy work. Steve Bartlett, welcome to the Trips and Global on Wheels podcast hour.
Thank you, Ming. It's really good to be with you.
Steve Bartlett has been a mayor, U.S. Congressman, board member, CEO, and disability independence advocate.
Right.
His specific areas of expertise include disability policy, financial services, financial education, and many other areas. He is chairman of the Board of RespectAbility Inc., a large and fast-growing nonprofit forcefully advocating for independence and respect for individuals with disabilities. Principal areas of advocacy are destigmatizing disabilities through TV and movies, promoting full employment for persons with disabilities, and advancing access to education for individuals with disabilities. He has served in a board leadership role in two large nonprofits as big as 50 to 100 million in revenue. From 1999 to 2012, Steve was the president and CEO of the Financial Services Roundtable, a trade association representing 100 of the largest integrated financial services companies, which provide banking, insurance, and investment services to American consumers. Very, very impressive, Steve.
Well, it's a joy. Life is a joy. But wait, Ming, you did cut off the most important part, and that is my 8 grandchildren, my 8 beautiful grandchildren, my 3 excellent adult children, and my wife of 52 years as of Saturday. So my wife, Gail.
Yeah, wow. Yes, that is the most important part.
Right.
I'm sorry for leaving that out. Yeah, family is important. That's wonderful. So our first set of questions will be about Congress, which you were there from 1999 to 2012, as we said earlier. You were in Congress for such a long time. What principles did you live by as a congressman while you were there?
Do the right thing. Get there early, stay late. Do your homework. Know more about the subject than anyone else, so you could help keep it on a policy. Follow the rules, and one of the rules, both formal and informal, one of the informal rules in any group is follow the rules of courtesy and civility. Provide respect to people that you may disagree with, or they may disagree with you, but listen to what they have to say and incorporate that into the formulation of policy. And then if you're trying to achieve political or policy goals, never give up. Just keep pushing on it. I ended up writing, or was the author of 18 different pieces of legislation, both in physical law and financial services and home mortgages and environmental legislation, as well as, and then of course the grandpappy of them all, the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yeah. And what skills, just following up from that, what skill sets and attributes should one possess before they even think about running for office?
Well, first is a public service mindset. So you set out to try to help other people, and you do that in your daily life. And as you do that, you can find expanding circles of helping other people. And then just total focus and dedication. Running for office or helping someone run for office is not to be taken lightly. It's only maybe 3 to 5% of the American people get actually involved that way. This year with Black Lives Matter, a lot more, but it's still a very small percentage of the American people. So what I tell especially young people is here's the deal with democracy. Democracy works for those who make it work, who get involved, and those who don't do anything, it doesn't work very well for them because they're waiting for someone else to help. And really, it's up to each one of us.
That's a good message there. And what did you learn while you were in Congress that you did not know before, and you think that the public would find illuminating?
I think it's always fascinating, or a light bulb illuminating, as you say, for people to learn how really hard members of Congress work. Even the ones you don't like, they still, being a member of Congress successfully anyway, is a 60, 70, sometimes 80-hour a week job. And then, of course, you have to balance that with your family and other things. And there's two jobs. One is in Washington, which is where legislation gets passed, and the other one is in your home district, where you learn about how the legislation affects real people. It's hard, and the members of Congress that are successful are totally focused and totally dedicated. And the other big lesson is really to learn to listen and respect people that express an opinion that you may disagree with. So figure out if you disagree, you don't have to turn around and change your opinion, but listen to what people have to say, and then try to incorporate the nuggets of truth that you find in that into the final outcome. That's how legislation is passed. That's what we did with the ADA, and that's how public policy is set, is bringing together diverse views.
Thank you for that. So the next set of questions is regarding finance, which I know you have a
Yes.
wealth of knowledge about, but the focus will be on finance for people with disabilities,
Good.
since that is the mission of this platform.
Right.
So as a general rule, how many months of expenses do you recommend that people with disabilities set aside in an emergency fund?
Well, the rule of course, it depends on the individual, but the rule of thumb is 3 months minimum in a savings account, an emergency savings account. And and then it's the risky, if you have a risky income level. So if you're an entrepreneur and your income is uncertain, well, then you need to move that up to six months. And then the secret is to set that emergency savings aside and just leave it in a savings account and use it truly for an emergency. And that doesn't mean an emergency is not when you just have something that you want to own. That's not an emergency. An emergency is a new set of tires because the tires on your car have blown out, or a new roof on your house. That's an emergency, and then you replenish the fund.
And then moving on to retirement and pensions, what kind of retirement and pension accounts should individuals with disabilities be aware of? For example, I know people with certain disabilities can open up an ABLE account. Can you elaborate on the benefits of opening such accounts as opposed to other similar accounts for just any regular person?
Sure. Well, ABLE accounts are the best thing going for someone who's on SSI or SSDI, because ABLE accounts allow you to bypass. It's not as complicated as it used to be, but it's still more complicated than it should be. But allows you to bypass that infamous, nasty, horrible $2,000 asset cap that come with SSI and SSDI. And I have to say, parenthetically, that's probably the worst abuse of federal policy I could imagine, is to tell someone that they could never have more than $2,000 in assets, as if we as a country, we have a goal to making sure that people stay in abject policy. So the ABLE accounts are one. If it were just me, I would just eliminate the asset cap, but can't do that. But it took about 10 years to get the ABLE accounts to where either you or your relatives, your grandparents, your parents can put aside money into this account that will help to support you as you go through life in a tax-free basis. But the main thing is that you get over the asset cap, and they can put it aside. And so if it's your grandparents, they can put it aside in incremental pieces, $10,000 a year, $5,000 a year, $2,000 a year, whatever amount you put in. And then the secret is to invest it. Don't just leave it in a savings account. Invest it in some sort of blended mutual funds or equities. And then find those people, if you're eligible for this, those people that want to help you in life. Ask them to put aside, contribute to it every year. Best thing is on your birthday, and say, this is not going to me, this is going to my future, so I'll be able to support myself in the future. So make it that sort of thing. Similar, not a disability account, but a 529 is something that everyone should have, because it again, when the baby is born, if the grandparents will put money into a 529 right then, and then every year on their birthday, by the time they go to college, their college education will be funded, and it won't have given a heavy load on the people that are funding it, because it did it a little bit a year over 18 years. So those are the two best. There are others. Everyone should have an IRA. That's one that you fund yourself. You can put in up to $5,000 into your IRA, and again, put it into investments, not into savings. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking they're being conservative with a savings account. Remember, you should have an emergency savings account. Okay, that's for a new set of tires or a roof that leaks. But then everything after that should go into investment, because over time, the stock market, over a 7-year period, the stock market doubles every 7 years. Okay, now from 1 year to the next, it may not increase, it may decrease, but over a lifetime, it's an investment that will allow you to have future assets, and therefore income, and therefore security.
That's fascinating. And then what financial issues should people with disabilities be most cautious about?
Okay, well, start with an emergency savings account, of course, as I said. Start with this word that some people hate, but I love, and that's budget. Start with a budget, and that is, you list out your income that you expect every month, and then you list out what's important to you to spend every month, starting with your savings account, okay? And put it in a list, okay? And it's no one's list but yours, okay? And that way you are managing your own expenses. Too many people, I was counseling with a young friend the other day that said, well, I just won't spend as much money, so it'll be fine. And he called me, and he was 2 weeks away from his next paycheck, or 12 days away from his next paycheck, and he needed $100. He was $100 short from being able to get his car out of the shop. Well, it was because he didn't write down his expenses that he planned to make, and so he ended up $100 short. So that's the wrong way to do it. So start with the budget. Start with knowing what you plan to spend, and then only spend that amount. I actually usually advise people to put all of their income into their savings account, and then twice a month do an automatic transfer of your expenses that you plan to spend into your checking account. And that way you can't spend anything that you didn't put in your checking account, and that will keep you on budget. And then the other thing is, any amount, to just get the habit of starting to invest and let your money grow for you. And then stick to the budget. If, at the end of the day, if you can't afford it, then don't buy it. I mean, it's not complicated. And so therefore, don't buy anything on your credit card unless you know that you can pay for it at the end of the month. And
I think, a lot of people shy away from, budgeting and talking
right.
about finance and organizing that whole bit, but it sounds like it is very crucial. And then moving on to other aspects of disability advocacy, how do you think we can get more people with disabilities participating in our, democratic process, whether that be voting or running for office or whatnot?
Well, as I said earlier, those that speak up are the ones that get heard. And if you don't speak up, nobody ever hears you. So there's a bit of a kind of a pyramid of influencing, of being involved in politics. So you start by just simply starting. You identify a cause or an issue, or a candidate that you like. So something that you want to have happen. And then you essentially start by sending an email, expressing your views, and then see what happens, and then send emails on those views later. When COVID is over, most congressmen or school board officials or city council have town halls, public meetings that you can go to. And I will guarantee, if you go to a town hall, with or without a disability, if your disability is visible or invisible, if you go to a town hall for a congressman or a school board member or a mayor or city council, you will get noticed. And then if you go a second time, you'll really get noticed, because they'll say, oh, there's somebody who has an opinion about something that seems to be well-spoken, and they'll seek you out and ask more opinions and then get you involved. that's what number one is. Just start expressing your views via email, phone calls, town halls, and such as that. Most, not all, most. So you just have to look of those public officials or candidates in your area that you think you like, and then contact them and go to some kind of a meeting where you hear them out. If you still like them, well, then get involved in the campaign if you want. If you don't like them after you meet them, well, go on to somebody else. There's no, you don't have to sign a contract. It's all freedom. And then as you get to know that candidate or that cause, they will invite you, make yourself available to be invited to be more part of the effort, either their campaign or their service or some kind of activity. And just start. I mean, just start. It's not, the hardest call to make is that first phone call. When I started, I told you I started in the 6th grade in my own awareness. I started in the 10th grade, actually in the summer. I was a rising sophomore. I started in the 10th grade when I noticed a candidate who was running for president that I liked. And so I called the local party headquarters and offered to join. And they told me they didn't have anything to join in my part of town. I lived in the bad part of town, in the hood. And so I said, well, how would you like one? And so I organized a club of 40 other high schoolers who wanted to be involved in that campaign. And pretty soon we were the most important club in the county for that campaign's candidate. So I said, it took work, but it didn't take long. It took maybe 2 months tops. And from there, then I was invited to do other things. So the hardest phone call is the first phone call where you call and say, I want to be involved.
That's so crucial, just deciding to act. And I
Right.
think you're right that, your voices are, especially in a democratic process, your voice isn't going to be heard unless you make it heard and go out and participate.
I remember distinctly a young man who became a lifetime friend came in when I was running for the Dallas City Council, and I was running, my campaign headquarters was my home. So one Sunday evening, there was a knock on my back kitchen door, and an individual said, is this your campaign headquarters? I said, yes. He said, well, I want to help. I said, well, we don't have anything going on Sunday nights, but we could make something if you'd like to be the Sunday night phone bank supervisor. And he said, sure, I'd be happy to. I said, okay, we'll come back next Sunday and we'll have five telephoners here and you can be in charge, right? So he did. He kept going. So by the end of the campaign, he was running all of the phone banks. And then when I got to the city council, I asked him to serve first on the Martin Luther King Jr. Advisory Board for the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center, which he did admirably. And then I made him chairman of the Civil Service Commission. And then he went on to run for the city council himself and got elected. So all in the space of 6 years. But he kept with it. The reason he came, by the way, on Sunday night, he said, I'm so busy during the week, I don't have time to do anything else. So that's an example. Another example was I was active, or am active, with Easter Seals, a big support organization. And so there was an individual, we invited people to come to my home to hear what we were doing. And this one guy came who owned his own business, very busy entrepreneur, and he pulled me aside and I pulled him aside and I said, thanks for coming, Phil. What he told me, what you're interested in disability issues, and he told me. And I said, well, we'd like you to help. He said, well, I can't, I just don't have time. And so I introduced him to 4 or 5 of the people there who had disabilities, who didn't have time either, but they were doing it. They were advocating. And so he agreed to help. Within 2 years, he was chairman of Easter Seals for the whole region. And now he's the director, he's the paid director for Easter Seals in the Washington area. So it all started with just showing up at one meeting.
Yeah, no, that is very important. And I think, however, in order to participate, I think the process could be made easier. So how do you think we can make voting easier for people with all different kinds of disabilities?
Well, so first, people with disabilities have to advocate for themselves, as I know you do. And that is to identify those barriers to voting and call it to the attention of the local county judge or the local election administrator, the local officials, Secretary of State even, and have suggested ways to remove that barrier, whether it's visual access to the ballot, or whether it's voting absentee, or trying to move these states away from thinking you have to have an affidavit. That the Commonwealth of Virginia still has an affidavit that certifies that you have 19 different reasons that you might be out of state, will be out of state that day. So the way to do it is just make voting easy to do if you want to vote early, and also voting by mail is the other. I don't see us going to anytime soon to a voting by internet or by email. I don't think that's in the cards in the near future, just for security reasons, but there are a lot of ways it could be made a lot easier, more accessible.
The next question is regarding employment. Have you hired people with disabilities in your public service or entrepreneurial work? And if yes, what kind of disabilities, and what has been your experience with these kinds of employees?
Yeah, yes, I have, both in my own hiring of people with disabilities. You know, you look for someone who's someone with a disability who does the job and does the job well, and then brings that extra measure of a disability so that other people will understand the disability a lot better. So my chief staff member that helped with the writing of the ADA had cerebral palsy. And she went on to become a rather well-known professor in disability law. She went back to the University of Hawaii, by the way. So she's in a good place. It's what I always did was to cast a wide net and make sure that you looked for people with disabilities that could do the job and bring them in. That's really the secret to it. So you get a diversity of opinion on your staff and on entrepreneurs, you know, ways to go in this world, but it's beginning to work. A lot of it is self-advocacy. People with disabilities have to decide, like everyone, to take a leap of faith, to take a risk, to go out and seek that job and seek that career and show what they can do. And then the world opens up. Just waiting is not going to do it. The ADA is not a ticket to a guaranteed life. It's a ticket to access. It's an access over the opportunity, but you have to access it yourself.
So the last few questions is regarding disaster planning, especially, you know, especially as climate change is becoming a reality. So how can people with disabilities plan better for disasters, you know, such as droughts, wildfires, you know, different things that are going on that are changing due to, you know, human activity or other factors?
The answer for an individual is just provide for your own individual circumstances. So if you have a risk of being shut in for a week or 2 weeks, you have to have enough food and water and that sort of thing. And also some emergency plans and a way to reach out and find other people. So it's not complicated. It just takes advanced preparation and advanced thought. I was really pleased this last year. It's one of those things that has not been well celebrated, but it happened. We have made it happen pretty quick. Respectability got involved in, again, it was one of those barriers that nobody had thought about, and only people with disabilities had realized it. So if you have SNAP, food stamps, which used to be called food stamps, people with disabilities, if they have low income, they're eligible for that, and that's fine. The difficulty was when COVID hit. Most people, especially people with disabilities, needed to buy their groceries online and have them delivered or have a curbside pickup at worst. But you couldn't buy groceries online with food stamps. So if you had cash or credit cards, you could, but if you got your food from SNAP, you couldn't. And it was just this great leave out that nobody had thought about. But with the help of a whole lot of other folks, we contacted the governors of all 50 states and USDA. And there are only 3 states that won't take food stamps or SNAP for online groceries. We haven't quite gotten them to agree in most states to pay for the delivery cost, but that's coming. We're working on that. But all that happened. It really happened because of grassroots people in all 50 states explaining it to the governors, explaining it to USDA, some allies in Congress, but most of the real effort came from grassroots of people lobbying their local governments to make this available And then a fairly easy, and in the space of 2 months, we changed the regulations so that food stamps were available the online groceries were available with food stamps. It was the most remarkable, fast change of public policy I think I'd ever seen with regard to disability rights.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about making it electronic and people being
Right.
able to use it online. So that is very, very helpful. So as you know, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is quite high. What
Mhm.
drastic measures do you think we can take and that hasn't been taken that would greatly improve this number?
Yeah. Well, by the way, it is improving every day, every year, every month, but we have a long ways to go. So again, like as I said, the glass may not be half full, but it's a third full. So that's the next big challenge. The first is what I think we've generally achieved is a general recognition of what is reasonable accommodation. So you can't go into an employer can't say, okay, I'm going to hire someone who can't do the job because of their disability. What you have to do is to change the job so that it will accommodate their disability. So I'll give you a classic example, and that is if someone who's a super sharp salesman that I met one time actually did, who and the job requires outside sales to travel from place to place. Well, if they're a good salesman, then you can hire a driver to do the driving and the salesman to do the selling. So that's the classic example of a reasonable accommodation, because then everybody wins, and the salesman becomes more productive because they do their planning and their paperwork and their phone calls in the car while somebody else is driving. So that's the classic. I went through a factory once with before ADA is a way to understand it, to where, and I went to the shipping desk. The parts desk, inventory. So this would be the person who would give out the parts to the manufacturing to put them on the machines, and it was, his name I recall was Johnny, and he was deaf, totally deaf. So I asked him in sign and with a notepad, what was the biggest obstacle that he encountered and how did he overcome it? And he said his difficulty was at this counter is that people kept coming and writing down their orders on the notepad in front of them and stealing and walking away with the pen. So the pen would go away, and the next person would come to do the order. There wouldn't be a pen there, and so people would get frustrated, right? So what Johnny did was he took found one of the welders, and he took a length of chain, and he welded the chain to the pen and welded the chain to the desk so people couldn't walk away with his pen. Well, that's a reasonable accommodation. There is a federal regulation that mandates that federal contractors or contractors that receive federal money have a 7% employment rate for those with disabilities. And I don't think that's enforced. I don't think it's enforced at all. I think employers aren't achieving 7%. And so I think if we can just enforce the regulation we now have, and I think in the next administration, I think that will be the next step, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden. I think that will be the step they'll take to start to enforce this 7%, because it's a law or a regulation on the books, and it's a matter of paying more attention to it.
Yeah, great points. And with that, that was our last question. Anyways, enjoy your hobbies and your travel and your mountain climbing. It's
Thank you.
amazing. And thank you so much for giving us this hour and being so patient and insightful with your responses.
Thank you, Ming. I admire your show. I admire what you're doing to open the minds of the American people.
Did you like this video? If so, share with your friends and be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want even more resources, be sure to sign up for our email updates on our website, traipsingglobal.com. Keep learning new perspectives, keep being inclusive, because it will make the world a better place for you and for everyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another episode of the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour.